1, 2, 3, go. It went straight to Mom's face.
Mom, are you okay?
You catch that?
Happy Mother's Day. Yep. Today is Mother's Day. For some of you, it's kind of a special day, right? It's a day of celebrating what a great mom you had, or maybe had in the past, or have now, or maybe today is a day of remembering who kissed your boo-boo, right, when you fell down, or talked to you about dating. Could be that your mom was the rock or the foundation for you, that whenever you had a problem, you knew she would be there. Or today could be a reminder of her saying things like my mom said, "Son, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. You better get your room cleaned," you know? Maybe you're a new mom and you're getting to celebrate Mother's Day for the first time. So Mother's Day is just a great special day for you. But for others of us, like me, Mother's Day can be a very difficult day. Maybe you've had a child pass away, or maybe because of your addiction, you've lost your kids to foster care, or maybe your mom's passed away. Whatever the case may be, Mother's Day could be really hard for you. And I'm going to tell you a story today about another mother who had her life just absolutely wrecked. Today I want to tell you the story of a mother on her very worst day. For this mom, no other day could have been as bad as this day. I mean, it was a day that absolutely wrecked her life. But before I tell you about her story, I want you to just kind of think with me about maybe a time in your life when you felt kind of wrecked by life circumstances. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you hit rock bottom because of an addiction. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you went through a painful divorce. Maybe your parents went through a rough divorce. Maybe it was a time in your life where you were struggling with depression or anxiety and insecurity. I mean, just whatever that might be, that time in your life that just really wrecked you. Maybe for some of you, you're actually right there right now. And I get that. I've gone through a lot of difficult times in my life that my life seemed extremely wrecked. But there was one particular moment in my life where I was wrecked in a way that I never expected. So in 1991, my daughter Haley was born on Mother's Day. And so, we didn't plan for it. It wasn't like today where sometimes people can actually plan the date of their kid. She was just ready to come, and here she was, and it happened to be Mother's Day. And I can tell you, it was the greatest gift for her mom, to have her daughter born on Mother's Day. It meant that every 7 years would be a reminder of that gift, right? Because Mother's Day would come around every 7 years. For me, it was a reminder that I had to buy 2 presents. Now, one for Mother's Day and one for her birthday. You fast forward now about 2.5 years. It's 1993, It was the day after Thanksgiving. We had spent Thanksgiving in Nixa, and we were up there with some relatives, and we were driving home late that night, and it started icing and sleeting. And we made it home safely, but Haley's mom had to work first thing in the morning. She was a waitress here at one of the Branson restaurants, and as many of you know, Thanksgiving weekend in Branson is one of the busiest there is, and so they want everybody to work. So about an hour after she had left for work, my life became wrecked like I'd never expected. It was about 7 in the morning. I was still in bed. The phone rang, and I remember thinking, who is calling this early in the morning, the day after Thanksgiving? And I answered the phone kind of groggy, and I heard a man's voice say that he was with the Branson Police Department. He told me there had been an accident at the restaurant where Haley's mom worked. Apparently, she'd pulled into the parking lot of the restaurant, and it was still covered with ice because it was early in the morning. And she'd slid down, and the back end of the vehicle she was driving had slid off of a retaining wall and was kind of caught balancing. And as she exited the vehicle, it shifted the weight in the vehicle, and it slid off the retaining wall, and she was crushed by the vehicle. And I remember just being in disbelief and hearing these words, and I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, am I dreaming? I mean, I must still be asleep. I mean, I can't really comprehend what's going on. And I heard the officer ask me, are you still there? And I said, yeah. And I asked, do I need to go to the hospital then right now? And he said no, that she had died on scene, and they'd be taking her straight to the funeral home. And as I hung up the phone, I tried to gather my thoughts, and I remembered that Haley was still asleep upstairs in her bed, and so I couldn't just race out of the house. You know, where would I go? What would I do? I realized my life and Haley's life had just been absolutely wrecked. And the truth is, we all have moments in our life like this. Moments that bring us to rock bottom. You know, you may be here today, and you may be in one of those moments. You may be experiencing that right now. And if you're not, in the back of your mind, you know that there will be moments ahead of you that will be wrecked by life circumstances. I mean, it's bound to happen, right? That's how life goes. So really, the question for us is not, are we going to be wrecked in life? It's, where do we go when we are wrecked? What's our next step? How do we deal with this moment in our life that is totally wrecking us? What will be able to actually put us back together? And so that brings me back to the story of a mother in the Bible. And so if you have a Bible, we're going to be looking in the New Testament. If you didn't know, the Bible is actually broken up into an Old Testament at the front, New Testament at the back. And the Old Testament is about life before Jesus comes, and the New Testament is about life after Jesus is on earth. If you don't have a Bible, we have free, easy-to-read Bibles back there on the bookshelf, and you are welcome to grab one off there, take it with you. Or if you downloaded our Gateway Branson app, there's actually a link to a YouVersion Bible so that you can just carry it around. And if you don't have any of that, you don't have a Bible, not a big deal, because we're going to actually put the words up here on the screen. So we're going to look today in the New Testament in the book of Luke, chapter 7. And so I want to set this up for you. So prior to Luke in chapter 7, Jesus and his closest friends are traveling around the countryside. They're hanging out with people, they're teaching people, they're healing people. He's even confronting the religious people of the day that are saying things like you have to be in church and stuff like that. He's even kind of getting in their faces. And as he's been doing this, he's slowly been gathering this group of followers. They've been following him around, and they've been trying to gain wisdom to what he's been saying, and they've been trying to hear what he's been saying, and they've been trying to watch the miracles that he's been doing. And as a result, his popularity is on the rise. He is so popular, in fact, that he had to close his Facebook down because he had maxed it out at 5,000 people and open up a Facebook page where he could have unlimited followers. I mean, you would say if Jesus was here today, he would be a rock star. His popularity was so big that there's no way Jesus would even now, at this point, want to mess with those little things in life. You know, he was just too big. He could actually go somewhere now and have thousands of people fill a stadium and listen to him preach. But look what he does in this passage in Luke chapter 7. We're going to look at verses 11 through 15. Soon afterward, Jesus went with his disciples to the village of Nain, and a large crowd followed him. A funeral procession was coming out as he approached the village gate. The young man who had died was a widow's only son, and a large crowd from the village was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart overflowed with compassion. "Don't cry," he said. Then he walked over to the coffin, and he touched it, and the bearer stopped. "Young man," he said, "I tell you, get up." Then the dead boy sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Okay, so here's what we know about this passage. There's this funeral procession going on, and it's going on for the only son of a widow. Now, this is a big deal, so I don't want you guys to miss this part. The mother of this boy has already mourned the loss of her husband, and now she is burying her only son. Her life has been wrecked. I mean, she has lost everything. You see, when she lost her husband and then her son, she lost her security, her income. See, women back in that day, they couldn't work to gain money. They had to rely on the oldest male in their family. See, and now both of those were gone. She would be left penniless and alone. She was probably past the age of childbearing, so she wouldn't be able to marry again. She would really be at the mercy of swindlers, rapists, and she'd probably be likely reduced to begging for food. So I can't even imagine what it would have been like for her walking out with that funeral procession to bury her one and only son, knowing the fear that she was going to have. After she buried him, everybody would leave. She would be all alone. Think about your life. Think about losing everyone around you. Your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your son, your daughter, everyone in your family, all gone. Your life would be wrecked. Amy and I, we have a blended family of 6 kids and 4 grandchildren now. And I can't even fathom what it would be like to bury one of those kids. But this is where we find this woman in chapter 7, this mom. She's on her absolute worst day. And she goes to bury her one and only son, and she encounters Jesus. And what's really amazing about this story is that the village of Nain is in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So Jesus, who now has rock star status, he would have no reason to go to Nain or even go through Nain, especially if he was trying to gather more Facebook friends or increase his Twitter status. There is absolutely nothing in Nain. And remember, Jesus isn't driving, right? He is on foot. So to go to Nain would be like coming from Springfield to go to Branson, but you decide to go to Kirbyville. I mean, it's totally out of the way. There's nothing there. And yet, he ends up in Nain. And so here's a picture of Nain today. It has a population of about 1,500. And there's only one road into Nain. And so the road you go in on is the same road you would have to take to leave Nain. So it's literally the road to nowhere. So we have to ask the question, why would the King of Kings, the Lord of the universe, the creator of all things, the Savior of the world, choose to go to some unknown town in the middle of nowhere? Why? What could be the purpose or value in going to Nain? You know, if I was following Jesus that day, I would be like, Jesus, hey, we must have taken a wrong turn. Why are we going to Kirbyville? I mean, Nain. There's nothing there. Why are we doing this? Surely we didn't do that on purpose, Jesus. But Jesus wasn't walking around aimlessly. He came to Nain so that we could have kind of a sneak peek at why Jesus came to earth and what he came to do. So let's go back and look at this passage again in Luke 7. Soon afterward, Jesus went with his disciples to the village of Nain, nowhere, right? And a large crowd followed him because he's very popular. A funeral procession was coming out, and as he approached the village gate, the young man who had died was a widow's only son, and a large crowd from the village was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart overflowed with compassion. Notice what it says there. When the Lord saw her, she didn't see him. He noticed her. He's the one that noticed her in her worst moment, in the middle of her crumbling circumstances, on the very worst day of her life. And you know why? That's because Jesus seeks out wrecked people. Jesus seeks them out. He's actually on the hunt for wrecked and hurting people. See, Jesus goes to Nain in the middle of nowhere because he's on a mission. His mission is to seek out and find wrecked people. I mean, this is an absolute horrible moment in her life. And Jesus goes to great lengths to seek her out, because Jesus goes to great lengths to seek out people on their very worst day. This is so important for us to know, because all of us, maybe some of you even right now, at some point, we will find ourselves absolutely wrecked. The wheels will fall off, things will start to unravel, and Jesus will go out of his way to the outskirts of nowhere to find you and me in our most desperate moments, because that's who he is. That's kind of what he does. The Bible tells us actually in Luke chapter 19, verse 10, that Jesus came to seek and save the lost, to look for, to seek after. Jesus is on the hunt for wrecked people. And if you came in here wrecked today, you need to know that Jesus is looking for you. And here's the deal, though. Jesus didn't just feel bad for her. It said his heart actually overflowed with compassion. And compassion is defined as this: a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate the suffering. See, Jesus didn't just pat her on the back and say, I'm so sorry for your loss, and then preach to her or pray with her. No. Jesus identified with her pain, and then he accompanied that with a desire to do something about it. Look in verse 13. When the Lord saw her, his heart overflowed with compassion. Don't cry, he said. Now that can sound a little insensitive, like don't cry. I remember when Haley would fall down and get a scrape on her knee or something, I'd tell her, suck it up, don't cry, you're okay. A lot of times Amy would tell me the same thing when the Kansas City Chiefs lost. But Jesus, he isn't telling her not to cry because of what just happened. He's telling her not to cry because of what is about to happen. So in verse 14 it says, then he walked over to the coffin and touched it, and the bearers stopped. And there's a reason they stopped. This would have been extremely shocking to everybody there in this day and age. You see, this would have been shocking because Jesus touching the coffin would have been unthinkable because he was a Jewish rabbi. And a dead body was considered unclean. And so if you were a religious person and you touched a dead body and you became unclean, there was this rigorous process that you had to go through of cleansing. It meant like multiple baths that you had to go through. There was a cleansing process of anointing and things like that before you could ever be welcomed back into right religious standing. So for Jesus to reach out and touch the coffin, it would have made him unclean. And yet Jesus just steps up to the dead boy's coffin and he reaches out and he touches it. Jesus touched what others considered unclean, what others considered untouchable. Which is so like Jesus if you get to know him. I wonder if some of you may feel that way. I felt like that at a point in my life. You think about your life and you think about all the things maybe that you've done in your past. You think, some of those things are just way too severe for Jesus. I've done some things that nobody would want to know about me. Evil, dirty things. Or I've had things happen to me. There's no way Jesus could touch me. But here's the deal. We learn in this story through Jesus that God is seeking you out, that he will go out of his way, regardless of your past, regardless of what you've done, regardless of the mess you've made, that God does not consider you untouchable. Jesus reaches out and touches the coffin. He reaches out and touches wrecked people. It goes on to say, young man, he said, I tell you, get up. Then the dead boy sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. See, Jesus does something. His compassion, it leads to action. He doesn't just stand by and say, I'm so sorry for your loss. No, he does something because Jesus is in the business of giving new life to wrecked people. Jesus seeks out wrecked people, and then he gives them the new life that they absolutely need. Not only does this boy come to life, not only does he give him his life back because of his miraculous power, he gives the mother a brand new future. Her future was wrecked. This family was completely ruined and hopeless. And in a moment, Jesus restores the family and brings back hope. This boy was brought back to life because Jesus seeks out wrecked people. That's what Jesus does. That's who he is. In the New Testament of the Bible, in the book of Ephesians, chapter 2, we hear from a guy by the name of Paul, he was once so spiritually dead that he actually would chase down the followers of Jesus and kill them in the name of religion. But then he has this beautiful encounter with Jesus, and it brings him new life. And he actually goes on to be one of the first church planners to start churches, back 2,000 years ago. And if you're here today and you're like, my life is wrecked, I want you to hear the words that Paul says in Ephesians 2. He says, once you were dead because of your disobedience and your many sins, You used to live in sin, just like the rest of the world, obeying the devil, the commander of the powers in the unseen world. He is the spirit at work in the hearts of those who refuse to obey God. All of us used to live that way. All of us. Following the passionate desires and inclinations of our sinful nature. By our very nature, we were subject to God's anger, just like everyone else. But God is so rich in mercy, and he loved us so much that even though we were dead because of our sins, he gave us life when he raised Christ from the dead. It is only by God's grace that you have been saved. And in verse 8, he goes on to say, God saved you by his grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus, so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. Paul says, you want to know who Jesus is? You want to know what Jesus came to do? Jesus came for wrecked people like you and me and Haley, like Paul. He is in the business of giving them new life. You know, I think all of us can relate to the story of the woman in Luke chapter 7. And maybe we can relate to her son. You know, for you moms out there, you may be struggling. You know, this week may be a reminder of a deep hurt or wound. You know, for me, it's a reminder that Haley doesn't have a mom. And so my heart aches every year around this time of year. It's just that constant reminder of that deep hurt that wrecked her and I back then. Some of you moms, maybe single moms raising kids, and that can be very hard, right? They cry, they're annoying, they're demanding. And if you're a single mom, you may feel all alone in that process. But you're not. Jesus is seeking you out. He wants to bring new life to wrecked people because that's who he is, and that's what he does. Some of you may feel like the widow in this story. You may feel like you've lost a sense of a better future and meaning in your life. You may feel like the woman in this story, like you or her, you are so desperate for what only Jesus can bring you, which has got to be a new life, new opportunity, a brand new future. And if that's you, I'm here to tell you that Jesus is seeking you out. Amen. Jesus gives new life to wrecked people. That's who he is. That's what he does. Some of you may feel like the boy in this story, that you are completely dead inside. You feel dead inside because of the shame and guilt you've been carrying around, and you've been carrying it around so long, you can't even remember what it's like to feel anything anymore at all. You don't care if you live or die. Some of you may feel so hopeless. You've given up to your addiction, your drink, or your drug. You're so dead that you are in desperate need of an entirely new life. You know, maybe you feel like you need Jesus to come up to your dead coffin and reach out and touch you and bring you new life. See, Jesus gives new life to wrecked people. That's who he is. That's what he does. That's why he came. So the band, they're going to come up here and they're going to play a couple more songs, to God and for God and about God. And you can sit, you can stand. We'll put the words up on the screen and you can sing along. But the first part of this song, I want you to get up and I want you to ask God to reach out and touch you and bring you new life. We don't pass an offering bucket here. This is just our gift to you. But if Gateway's your church home and you want to help us reach more people whose lives are wrecked and people who need Jesus to seek them out and reach out and touch them, you can put a gift in the back. We've got buckets back there at the connection spot. And if you would like somebody to to pray for you or with you right now. There's people over here to my left and right. They would love to do that for you. If you're feeling wrecked right now, let them help you by praying for Jesus to reach out and touch you. So my ask would be, during these songs, won't you respond by letting Jesus reach out and touch you and bring you new life?